White dress, red. White flowers, red. White, red, white, red. Flowing, seeping, drying, dying. It's happening all over again.
Lyle?
An ethereal voice asked. My windpipe tightened itself, and I fought hard to breathe. My mind folded into multiple layers like a paper crane, and I could not comprehend the situation at hand.
Extraction.
The same voice shouted, now only clearer. I took in a deep inhale of air as the seawater-scented biogel drained and slid off my naked body in slimy clumps. My mind remained in shock from the events, yet I was calm about my familiar whereabouts. The wide medical table I slept on, the black glass walls, the bumpy white ceiling, the digital beeps and boops from translucent digital screens. Now I had truly reawakened, returned to reality. Yes, I answered weakly and unaware that my name had been called upon several times by my therapist, Dr. Ian Aldo, a platinum blonde-haired man who wore a charcoal dress shirt and black dress pants all underneath a white lab coat. Have you been doing the breathing exercises I recommended? Dr. Aldo robotically asked as I continued to look at the ceiling and contemplated whether to tell him the truth or lie. No, I begrudgingly said as I tried to move my still numb body. It's nothing. Just the accident getting to my head again, that's all. The one with your wife? Yeah, that accident. Mr. Barker, tell me about it again then. Is this still necessary? Tell me what's still bothering you about it. As I told you before, your experience in astral reality stems from the trauma you suffered from the accident. They impact your mental wavelength and put you on the same path as your reality, regardless of how much you try to forget it. By coming to terms with it, you can grieve easier. Once it becomes easier, your brain will invite the possibility of a long-wanted desire. Easier? Grief is not a fucking scientific progress. Mr. Barker, I meant no disrespect. If you comply with me, we can fix the pathway of your next AR session. My eyes focused closer in on the white goosebumps of the ceiling, and I sighed in annoyance as we run through the story for what felt like the 800th time. It's June 8, 2018, in Boulder City, Nevada. I'm a 28-year-old college graduate wearing a tux jacket that felt a little too tight on my arms. The humid heat wave at the time was hot enough to grill a steak on a rock, and Cassie and I were to be husband and wife. I remember being out and about talking with families and friends for so long that my shirt collar gave me a new tan line. Both Cassie's parents were there, and so was my mom. If only Cassie had gotten the chance to meet my dad and see what a guy he was. Although he was no longer with us, I already had the feeling that he was happily smiling down to my mom and I from heaven. At the wedding, I stood in the church for a long while and waited for Cassie to come through the doors. Everybody from our families had already gathered at their seats and looked exhausted from the heat. Grandmas fanned themselves with their wedding brochures. Children's sweat-slicked hair stuck to their forehead, and I even saw Father Doyle pull out a mini USB fan that he plugged into his phone. Funny thing is, for a place of God, it lacked an AC unit to prevent us from succumbing to the fires of hell. The moment then came when the double doors opened, and the organ played that wedding tune you hear at everyone else's weddings. Cassie was stunning in her wedding dress. From head to toe, she looked like a Disney princess. The silver headpiece with white flowers combed neatly into her light brown hair, and her long curled bangs that were parted to the sides of her face. Each bang brushed gently against her porcelain red puffed cheeks as she walked down the aisle. When it came time for the vows, Cassie and I looked at each other longingly as the father spoke. I even remember the shimmer of light that came through the cathedral window and reflected off her emerald green eyes. The warmth of her smooth hand in mine cusped together in unity as the father asked us if we would take each other as husband and wife. Both of us answered that we do, and the organ finishes its final notes as our lips meet mine. As I carried Cassie out the church, the bells rung loudly and drowned out the cheers of our family members. Two young newlyweds about to begin a new chapter in their life. We both probably had the biggest smiles on our faces as we drove off. The Ford Fusion 2018 Cassie's uncle gifted us was the perfect start to our lives. Next, we would buy a house together, and in due time we would have children. All these thoughts ran through our heads, and we felt unstoppable. We felt free. We were two lovey-dovey individuals who were happy as can be. When Cassie and I headed towards a green light, a driver in a USV rushed through the red light and T-boned us. The impact instantly killed Cassie and left me broken and bloodied. It hurt the first time, but after losing count of how many times this had happened, I had already become used to it. Instead of pulling myself out, I decided to linger in the pain, keeping myself near the cusp of death every time the events played out the same. It was only when my vitals began to spike that I was pulled out from AR. "Lyle," Dr. Aldo said as I continued to lay in silence, "were you contemplating suicide? We can always continue this in another session. I'll reset the machine and prepare medications for you to take." "No! Not yet. I need some time to think." I began to feel my fingers again and tried to make a fist. Today's date is February 13, 2094. Your previous session was June 7th, 2086. Shall I prepare food? Your body has been in astral reality stasis for around 8 years and will require nutrition. Go ahead. Initiate the cleaning sequence. I ordered Dr. Aldo before the biosleep chamber emptied the contents of the miscellaneous biogel clumps and prepared to clean the crevices of my body with water jets that fired from the corners. It was June 8th, 2018 in Boulder City, Nevada, a few minutes ago. Now it's February 13th, 2094 in Colony 36115. Realistically, I'm 103 years old, but due to my use of the biosleep chamber for astral reality, I've put my body in stasis various times enough to maintain my early 40s physique. The humid heat wave of Nevada somewhat still lingered, only now I, including many others, live in the confines of colonies, technologically advanced slums created by Rystock Industries, an ambitious underdog tech company that rose to rival Apple in 2021 and become the ultimate corporation it is today. Within these neighborhoods, we are all monitored by therapists. Not your typical human therapist, but an android. He or she cleans up after you and takes care of your every need, so you don't have to. Human therapists, or medics, nurses, doctors, pediatricians, or what we all used to refer to them a long time ago. All were laid off in 2036 when the first batch of therapists, then called medical androids, were introduced. These androids are made of synthetic human-like skin, can speak any language, never have to eat, never need to sleep, and are mentally programmed to protect the house owner. Every android also contained a built-in voice-activated failsafe that would reboot the system in their manufactured brain if they were to become emotionally compromised. Where are the humans? Well, we're all in our perceived afterlife in astral reality. Nobody goes outside anymore. In 2030, Rystock Industries broke boundaries that were thought to be impossible. They discovered astral reality, or AR for short. The invasion of an individual's mind from the multiverse, discovered through failed wormhole teleportation tech. Unable to transport physical objects through space for decades, Rystock managed to transport the human consciousness through space and time. For decades, people went to sleep every night and dreamt about their deepest subconscious desires, only to be stripped of them in the morning. The invention of AR changed all that. Now with the person you love, another version of you is with the love you seek. Not satisfied with your career, another version of you has the career you desire. Endless possibilities exist, so long as your brain can concentrate and will it into being a reality. What began as an attempted extension of virtual reality therapy to help those in need, transformed into a household item for every living American, marketed as no responsibility, only individuality. This product ensured that everyone would get to live out the fantasy they wanted, and in turn, they did. As the years went on, AR technology became more innovative. They began to integrate biosleep chambers, feeding tubes, waste filters, and much, much more. As the technology got better, more and more people refused to leave astral reality, including myself. For the past 60 years, I have tried to prevent my wife's accident so many times only to lose her over and over the same way. Some things change, as expected with multiverses, but she always stays the same. Her demure attitude and smile always remained, regardless of her hair color, body shape, or clothing style. Every time I return to Cassie, it's 2016 all over again. We're back in my dingy apartment and on my bed, her hands and hips pressed on me, my blanket creased upon my bare back, and the dim bedroom engulfed in the shadow of her nude figure. Another year would then pass and it's 2017. We both now share a home and bed together. Sometimes there are fights and sometimes there's love, but the happier memories always outweigh the bad. Eventually the years go by and the inevitable day comes. June 8th, 2018. Our wedding, her death. Every time I try to prevent it, I postpone the inevitable. We stay and celebrate the wedding at the church. She gets hit by a bus on her way to work in a few days. We have a wedding in a secluded area with very little people. An allergic reaction to a plant kills her. Whatever action I take, the consequence is always losing her. The same cycle repeats over and over as if I'm destined to lose her in every life I have. It's enough to drive even the most desperate people crazy, but I guess when you still love a woman enough to keep her ingrained in your head for 90 plus years, it doesn't matter what it takes. Even when you've seen her die countless times, you'll still keep on trying in hopes that one reality exists where you two happily grow old. A few minutes passed after I exited my AR session and now was being poked and prodded at with needles filled with Narration to revitalize the nerves in my body. First time injection always gives off an allergic reaction, but after the 1000th time, you feel like you're just an addict doping up every time for another high. Once my nerves are reactivated, Aldo dresses me in a gray robe and I'm wheeled off to my kitchen by wheelchair since my body's still numb from the waist down. Pancakes, bacon, eggs, fruits, and vegetables have been prepared, Mr. Barker, and the eggs are over easy as per usual, Dr. Aldo said as we entered the kitchen. Various matcha-colored plates of food laid before me, and I weakly lifted the fork with my right hand a dime. The sudden touch of cold steel shot through my fingertips and into my palm as I grabbed it. As I skewered pieces of fluffy pancake with my fork and dipped it into a small puddle of syrup on my plate, the sweetness of maple extract and processed sugar engulfed my mouth with a burst of candied flavor. I've eaten an AR before, and the food does fill you up, but the familiarity of your own body from which you were born in is a feeling I could never full well explain. When in the body of another you, let's say, your face stays the same most of the time. Only your body ends up in different kinds of shapes, be it skinny, starving, ripped, dying, or fat, but will never feel like your original husk, I guess you could say. Not to mention, the five senses will always react wildly to Narration. It reawakens the nervous system, but it also enhances the five senses too for a short period of time. So it feels like you're experiencing every five senses again for the first time. I barely walk around the apartment anymore, but Aldo always seems to keep it neat and tidy. Colony homes for 1 to 2 people are the size of a 1-bedroom apartment and cost much less than an actual apartment. Windows have a tint feature to dim out the bright advertisements outside. The rooms have built-in metal dials that are connected to magnetic spheres in the wall that are able to project digital screens that display media. But it's a baby's toy compared to the tech the prestigious, aka rich and wealthy, get. However, I barely touch any of these anymore. They've lost their charm on me, and I continue to rely on AR to take me back to when technology felt simpler to me. There's just something about having shared wired headphones with Cassie in 2016 that can't be done with Bluetooth or Virtua Tech. Cheesy, I know, but what love isn't. Shall I run diagnostics on the AR drive? Or would you prefer I only reply when you ask for me? Dr. Aldo asked as he walked over to me. I'd like a session. Proceed, Mr. Barker. He sat down on the couch. I stared into the eyes of Dr. Aldo for a moment to contemplate whether I should take the Seroxy to increase my oxytocin and serotonin levels in my pituitary gland. Your body language, accelerated heart rate, and brain activity seem to show that you're conflicted, I assume, Dr. Aldo interjected as I was in the middle of my thoughts. Is it the thoughts of suicide from before? If so, I'm here to listen. He did not blink at all, as most androids did. When is enough doctor? How do I know when it's time to give up? Clarify what you think you have had enough of, Mr. Barker. My AR sessions. I go under every time and I can't save her. It's like I can't have her. And you feel it is useless to keep trying because it always results in her death. Yes. Every time I go under, I wake up next to Cassie as if the past years were all just a terrible nightmare. My brain wills myself into finding a universe where she and I exist, but it never changes. The accident always occurs. Her death always occurs one way or another. There's always the Saraxi, but you've refused it on various occasions. Why make it harder on yourself? There's no need to put yourself through such pain to gain what you desire. It's pride, Dr. Aldo. If I cannot overcome my own demons, then there's no progress. If I cannot do it through my own efforts, then it is useless. I wouldn't expect you to understand. Humans throughout history and to this day have been motivated by love and compassion. If you are to find the answer to when enough AR is enough AR, you must measure the integrity of what you deeply desire. What do you desire? To love your wife again? To live the life you deserved? To die and be free of this burden? I desire her. Yet after all these years, you still haven't come to terms with her death. Perhaps it's not the best of words to say, but maybe you shouldn't keep reaching for her, but learn to let her go. What are you trying to say? What is there to live for except for what I desire? Everyone is plugged into AR. There is barely a world out there left to live. Like I said before, Mr. Barker, your trauma impacts your AR sessions, and in order to will your deepest desire into existence, you must come to terms with it. However, after all these years, it seems that the one factor motivating you is more of preventing and forgetting about the accident rather than coming to terms with it. I sat in silence looking down at the concrete floor for a while and could feel Dr. Aldo's unblinking eyes still staring at me, waiting for an answer. Aldo. I grasped for words to say to an android that seemed to know more about me than I did. What is the point of it? What if it doesn't make a difference? Mr. Barker, for these past 57 years I've served you, I've seen a man hell-bent on fixing his past. You strive to fix it, but refuse to accept the fact that she is no longer with you. Because every time you enter AR, she lives and the death of the Cassie you first love is but a distant memory until you lose her again. Thus, the cycle repeats again and again. As the theoretical physicist Albert Einstein was once paraphrased, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Give me the Saraxi, I immediately demanded. I said, give me the Saraxi, goddammit! You still have the Narration in your system, Mr. Barker. Your lower body hasn't fully awakened yet, and your upper body is still tense. I'd highly advise against it. Proceed with the next AR session, I ordered Dr. Aldo as I wheeled myself into my biosleep chamber. There's a 70% chance for paralysis and 30% of brain damage. Think this over thoroughly. I order you to proceed. I cannot for your well-being. Doing so would mean death. System override Almada 116. Order to proceed with AR session with Saraxi, I said to trigger Dr. Aldo's failsafe. Proceeding with AR session. His voice box fidgeted as he walked over to the biosleep room and calibrated the AR settings on a digital interface. 4 robotic arms with 4 plastic-tipped pincers came out from the ceiling, stripped me of my robe, and lifted my body off the wheelchair and onto the wide medical table. The biosleep chamber then closed and sealed itself airtight before it began to fill up with biogel. As the biogel rose like water in a bathtub, an eye-shaped tiara ejected out from underneath the medical table and collapsed itself onto the back of my head to transfer my consciousness through space. During this time, I closed my eyes and focused on what I wanted the most before the Saraxi filtered into the biogel and entered my system. Once the biogel filled up and mummified my body, the device on the back of my head worked its magic, and just as I opened my eyes, I saw Cassie again. Only this time we were in a large white room, and she wore her wedding dress from 76 years ago. Where am I? I asked, a little confused and fearful of what plane of existence I might have entered. Suddenly, I heard a voice in the back of my head.
Mr. Barker, forgive me, but this was the only way.
You booted up VR instead of AR! What the hell are you doing? I shouted out of frustration and anger as I believed this would be my very last chance to see Cassie while I was still alive.
I am a pre-recorded message implanted in VR by myself before you rebooted my system. As I'm speaking, your body is convulsing from the usage of Saraxi and Narration. In other words, you are overdosing,
Dr. Aldo said without an ounce of concern in his voice. What? You psycho! Pull me out! Get me out!
I've programmed this VR simulation into the biosleep chamber system in order to help you progress forward. Talk to Cassie. Hold nothing back.
I'm about to die in real life, Aldo. Override code 4. Quit program. 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 I screamed repeatedly, hoping the system would shut down through the virtual voice command, only to still be left alone with Cassie. Lyle, Cassie softly said as I looked at her, I've missed you so much. She ran towards me and gave me a hefty hug. However, the sensation was light years different from AR. Her hug felt like my muscles contracting to replicate the pressure of one. She had no smell of any kind, and when I caressed her face, it felt as if I was brushing thin air. It was not the same. Do you still love me? Cassie asked me as the emerald green in her eyes stared into mine. I took a long look at her and finally felt my heart break in a way it had never done before. I felt my windpipe tighten again and I fought to breathe. All those years I relived with versions of her, and never once did I think about my Cassie. The Cassie I fought to get back all those years ago was long dead and gone. Yes, Cass. Of course I do. Always have. I struggled to tell her as I continued struggling to breathe. She said nothing but smiled as tears watered from her eyes and trickled down to her red puffed cheeks. White dress, tears. White flowers, tears. White, tears, white, tears. Flowing, seeping, drying, falling.
Lyle?
An ethereal voice asked.